So I got a thing, and you know what this means. Hello and welcome back to the workshop, and welcome back to the Great Guitar Build-Off 2021. I just received my oscillating belt sander. So with that, I think it's time to start working on the body. Now, I've got my side pieces all milled up, but they're at about 4.5 millimeters, which is a little thick for bending. You can see I've got a little bit of flex here, but because I'm going to be laminating these pieces by bending the inner circles and then laminating my side pieces on top of them, that's going to make these sides a little bit thick. So I'd rather have them somewhere between 2 and 3 millimeters. So, as I've stated before, you could plane this out by hand, and I have done that with some great success. But it is a little bit of a tedious process with a hand plane. And I'd ordered another belt sander that kept getting back ordered on me. So, finally, I found this one in stock. So I canceled the other order that kept getting back ordered, and I ordered this one. Now that it's shown up, I can start thinning these out. So very basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this much like a drum sander by using this jig that I've thrown together. This was put together very much in the same fashion that Ben from Crimson Guitars did. I didn't go into detail into how to make this because I think he did a very good job in his video, which I will link down below if you want to set up one of these yourself. But very basically what it does is it's spring-loaded, and it's got a set screw in here so you can change the depth of where your cut is. And then your board just runs across the face of that and across the sanding belt to help thin out the pieces. Now, with what I've got here, this gives me at least a couple millimeters of play on the face of this. So with that, let's go set up the belt sander and get sanding. Alright, so very basically, I've got this set to its innermost depth, which is tight enough to push the board through, but not loose enough where it's flopping through. And very basically all I'm going to do is we're going to go a few passes, we're going to extend it, and then we're going to do some more passes until we get to the depth that we're looking for. That was quite a bit of sanding. It's the next day now, and I'm ready to start doing some bending. First, I want to take a moment. I'm one of those weird people that saves all my little bits and pieces of scrap to use for, you know, filling and doing any little projects, but I also save the dust for gluing. But I just want to take a minute and look at how red this dust is. It looks like dye. It's unbelievable. I've seen Red Heart before, but I've never had the privilege to actually work with it, so this has been fun to work with so far, even in the little bits that I have done. But now we're getting into bending. What you're going to need for bending, if you're going to be doing acoustic or electric or what have you, is you're going to need a mold. Now, in this case, I don't know if I'll do this shape again, so I just made a rough mold. It's nothing special. It gets me into the spot that I need it to be. And there'll be a nice template if I do decide to use these again. So I've just got a couple scraps that I've cut into pieces here. Now, because of the body that I'm doing, I'm going to be doing a mid-circle on the bottom part of the body and then the main horn. So it's going to be in two pieces, and then I'm going to bend sides around those two pieces to finish up the form. So this bending is going to take part in 3 different sections. So we're going to do the top, the bottom, and then we're going to do the whole thing. So what you're going to need for that is you're going to need a bending iron of some sort, which I've got heating up here to the side of me. You're also going to need clamps, water, and something to help you push on the mold. And I would also recommend that you wear gloves while you do this so you don't burn your hands. What I like to do when I do bending is I like to use a thin piece of sheet steel. It helps transfer the heat from one side to the other because this will conduct the heat as well with the wood placed between it and between the iron. And then I also like to use a scrap block. Doesn't have to be anything special, just as long as it's got one flat end to help press on the other side so that you're not holding your hands up against the metal. So now that we've got all we need, let's get into bending, or like I like to call it, the point of no return, because I only have enough to do this once. Let's just be glad that I didn't do any kind of crazy curves or anything. Alright, now this one went pretty well. We got it in the mold. We're going to let it dry. There will be some spring back once I get these out of the clamps, but I'm very happy with how that went. I will say that Red Heart is a little harder to bend than some of the other woods I've worked on, but I think that turned out pretty well. Now I did make this a little long so that I could trim off the ends once I get the sides on to the inner part. But let's work on the inner circle now. You caught me red-handed. I just discovered that bending redwood and getting it wet does dye your hands. Just a little fun tip. Imagine if I wasn't wearing gloves. So, I was definitely cautiously optimistic about the mold that I had set up in 2 parts here. And for good reason. Sometimes things don't go right. Now, it's obviously the next day. I've given myself some time to calm down, but I went ahead and started bending one of the sides only to realize that it's got a nasty crack in it. Now I have a couple options in this situation. I only have enough material to do this once, so realistically the ring part of this was just to add some girth for the post to sit in so that it doesn't have a whole lot of flex when it's in place. But I think that the appropriate step is going to be doing it in the traditional way that acoustics are done. So I've gone ahead and I've cut this second mold, and I've already transferred the one piece in here, which also cracked. Little backstory, what happened was I was clamping it down to the piece here, and the clamp slipped and it snapped back, which ended up cracking this piece and cracking the edge of the top piece here that I've transferred into this mold. Thankfully, it was at the horn part that's going to get cut off, so that's not going to cause too detrimental of a problem, as I have cut off a bulk of that already. So to remedy this, I think that I'm going to do away with the inner circle, and I'm going to just double laminate the top part here. So I'm going to add another piece and glue it on the inside here, in between where the ribs are going to go, and I'm going to take the circular piece and I'm going to use it for one of these sides. In theory, that should give me enough material to close up this box, and I don't have so much wasted material. The question is then going to be, now that I've gotten this bent into a circle, am I going to be able to make this curve here? Which is what we're going to find out. The nice part is that because I've already bent this, it's already in a semicircle, so it's not going to be that hard to get into the mold as far as that part is concerned. The problem is it's going to be way too long, meaning that I'm going to have to trim some of this down. But I got to figure out how much I need to trim down. Now the simple way to do that is to start at the horn section here, get that into the mold, and figure out this curve here, in which case I can trim off at where the center point is going to be. And I think that's going to be the easiest way to do this. Alright, I failed to hit record. I was too focused on getting this bent into place. Well, we've got our first side done, and we've got it in the mold. Now just to do the second one. Alright, and there is side two. So we'll let these dry for a little while, and then I'll carefully slide them out of the mold so that I can glue these horns together. And then with that I can cut my straight angle here so that I can then glue these two pieces together with a end block. So we're here. This has been drying in the mold for a few days, and I've got basically the shape I'm looking for, which is awesome. The only downside is I wasn't able to remedy all of the cracks. Once I get the kerfing and everything all set up in here, I will have to address those, but I think I've got a plan for that. But before I do anything, I am going to have to put a radius on the top and the back of this, which I'm going to have to make a block for in order to sand out this entire thing. It's not a significant radius, but I want it to be on both the top and the back. But before I get into any of that, I want to get the heel block and the back block established. So I have cut these two pieces of maple roughly. The curves are spot on, so realistically I could glue these in place as they are, but they're much bigger than I want them to be. But before I glue them in place, I want to cut the channel for the post that's going to go through the body. That way, once I get all the kerfing and everything done, I can then use that to go the rest of the way through on the red heart. Now with this, I realized a couple things. I did make this slightly taller. There was a channel cut in this. This is actually that scrap piece of maple from that table beam that I used for the Use What You Got challenge. It's a nice chunk of curly maple, and basically what I'm going to do is I've got to establish my center line, and then that way, the center line down the middle of this block, I can then measure out where that square is going to be, drill out most of it, and then chisel out the excess. Go in and clean up with a file and everything else. So I'm going to have to do this on both blocks. So, because I've already cut the curve into it, what I'm going to have to do is I'm actually going to have to transfer those center lines onto the curved parts and then drill that part of it, and then use the backside to then square up where that square is going to be for the post to go through. Alright, as you can see, we went a little undersized just to be on the safe side, so I'm just going to go ahead and take some files and chisels and clean the rest of this out. And then once I get that all established, then it's going to be the easy part. It's just trimming this down to size and getting them glued into place. Alright, now that we're most of the way there, it needs to be widened a little more, but I want to transfer that square onto the back to make sure that I've got that nice and plumb. Alright, so we've made it this far. I've got them roughly down to shape. I can always go and alter these once they're in place, but we've got a nice tight fit. Got a nice snug fit on these squares here, which will be nice once we get them in place. Like I said, I wanted it to be able to move smooth, but not too smooth, so that we hardly have any motion up and down. The string tension will obviously hold these in place pretty well once they're all together. All we got to do then is glue these blocks in. So I may have gotten a little carried away off camera. What I've done since we put on the blocks is I've added in the kerfing, and I have roughly kind of shaped it down to the radius that I'm looking for. Now, I have gone ahead and I have aligned these pretty well, but what I have noticed is that because of all the spring back from the mold, these blocks kind of shift completely out of square. So I think to counteract that, when I glue on the top, I'm going to have to actually put my posts through here with the neck in order to keep these square and in line, so that we can glue up the top in place in the correct orientation. But in order to do that, as you can see, I have the holes, but I don't have any holes on the top here. Now, the other issue, as I mentioned before, is I had some cracking when I was getting these in the mold. This red heart is extremely hard to bend, and I should have gone thinner, but I don't have a drum sander, so that became tedious. So I've got a couple cracked sections here, which I think I have a plan to make those kind of go with the theme, but we'll have to wait until we get the top on here maybe the back as well, in order to address those cracks. So what I need to do is I need to drill some holes through these square holes in order to cut the hole for the posts so that I can then set this in the correct orientation. Now I also have this mold which I have set up that I'm going to be then using to make a radius on the top and back. So I'm also taking this and using it as my reference point to make sure that this radius is spot on for the top. And right now we are sitting pretty close. I'm going to have to do a little more sanding on here. And then once I get the top mounted, I'm then going to flip it over and move to the back to then get the radius on the back side of this. I've already gone ahead and done some of the planing to get it close, so I'm going to have to go back and do some more of it. But I think I need to get everything in place before I can move forward with that. I'm going to first take my drill to make a hole, and then I'm going to take this saw here to then cut out the inner part of the square so that I can clean it up with a file afterwards. And then that will help me line everything up as it's supposed to be when I do the glue up, so everything is square. All right, we have what looks like a guitar. I am so happy with this. With all the trouble that the body was giving me, I was a little bit nervous, so I am just so ecstatic that it is in one piece now, and that this post worked out exactly how I wanted it to. Now the nice thing about having the post in the center here is that with the body being as it is and being acoustic, it's more like a tone post. So the string tension is going to be entirely on the neck. It's not going to be on the body at all. This is more just a housing for anything else. But I mean, look at it. It's guitar shaped. Whew! I gotta say, there were some really stressful parts of this, especially with the body cracking when I was bending it. Like I said, I think I have an idea to remedy the look of that, to make it blend with the entirety of the project. But now that we're here, now that I'm happy, now that we've got a nice 3-degree drop, the reference point for the body is almost entirely there. I think I'm going to end this video here. I'm so glad this worked out. And now that the neck is in, this gives me a reference point to now completely radius the body and make sure that that is all nice and plumb so that we can glue the top on, which is what we're going to work on next. I obviously got a little bit of sanding to do on the face of this here. I'm only going to do this side of it just to make sure. And then that way we can get the top on and we can start lining up where our electronics are going to go. If you like how this is going, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There will be plenty more of these to come. I've still got quite a bit of work to do. We still have to finish up the body and we still have to get all the electronics in there. So as always, we'll see you in the next one. Stay tuned.